As you can see, the will clearly states that I, Rebecca, shall inherit the entirety of the Montgomery estate, including the family business, investment portfolios, and all properties. My sister's voice rang through the mahogany-paneled office as she smiled triumphantly at the stunned faces around the table. I sat frozen, a family photo still clutched in my trembling hands, watching her theatrical performance at our father's will reading just 3 days after we had laid him to rest. My name is Charlotte Montgomery, and at 32, I was about to lose everything I had spent the last decade building alongside my father. Or so my sister thought. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I never expected the reading of my father's will to feel like a courtroom drama, complete with gasps, tears, and a villain twirling her metaphorical mustache. Yet here we were, gathered in the plush conference room of Harrington and Associates, the family's longtime legal firm, as my older sister Rebecca performed the role she'd been rehearsing her entire life, the rightful heir to the Montgomery fortune. "Perhaps we should take a moment," suggested Mr. Harrington, my father's attorney for over 30 years. His silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses gave him the appearance of a kindly professor rather than one of Boston's most formidable estate lawyers. "This is an emotional time for everyone." Rebecca waved her manicured hand dismissively. "There's no need. The document is perfectly clear." She tapped her finger on the will in front of her. "As the eldest child, I inherit everything. Father always believed in traditional succession." Traditional succession. The phrase hung in the air like a bad joke. There had been nothing traditional about my relationship with our father, Richard Montgomery, founder of Montgomery Sustainable Technologies. While Rebecca had been collecting advanced degrees and socialite husbands, I had been beside our father in the trenches of the business for the past 10 years, transforming a conventional energy consulting firm into a leader in renewable technology solutions. I looked around the room at the shocked faces, our family accountant, Mr. Winters, who had witnessed my tireless work expanding the company's portfolio, our household manager, Martha, who had practically raised me after my mother's death, and my fiancé, Daniel, whose hand now squeezed mine under the table in silent support. "This can't be right," I finally managed, finding my voice. Dad and I had discussed succession planning extensively. We had a roadmap for my eventual leadership of MST. Rebecca's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Discussions aren't legally binding documents, Charlotte. This will is." She glanced at the attorney. "Isn't that correct, Mr. Harrington?" The elderly lawyer removed his glasses, polishing them slowly with a handkerchief. I recognized this habit from countless business meetings. It was what he did when buying time to choose his words carefully. "The document before us does indeed allocate the Montgomery assets to Rebecca as the eldest child," he acknowledged, causing my stomach to plummet. "However—" "Well, that settles it," Rebecca interrupted, gathering her designer handbag. "I'll have my team begin the transition process immediately. Charlotte, I'll need you to prepare a complete briefing on all current projects and client relationships." She spoke as if ordering coffee, not dismantling my career. I stared at her, truly seeing my sister for perhaps the first time. At 38, Rebecca remained strikingly beautiful, with our mother's elegant features and our father's commanding presence. She had always been the golden child, valedictorian, Ivy League graduate, married to hedge fund manager James Parker by 25. Their subsequent divorce had been Boston's most talked-about split until she'd married, and divorced, tech entrepreneur William Harrison 3 years later. What Rebecca had never been, however, was interested in our father's business. During the rare occasions she had joined us for dinner, she had openly described sustainable energy as tediously practical compared to her art curation work in New York. Yet now she sat before me, prepared to take the helm of a company she had never contributed a single idea to. "You don't know the first thing about running MST," I said, working to keep my voice level. You've never even toured our new research facility. Management is management, Charlotte. The company needs strategic leadership, not technical handholding. She checked her watch. I have a flight back to New York in 3 hours. James, reach out to my assistant to arrange the necessary meetings. Our family accountant, a typically mild-mannered man in his 60s, cleared his throat uncomfortably. Rebecca, with all due respect, MST's growth over the past 5 years has been directly tied to Charlotte's development of the microgrid technology division. The clients specifically work with the company because of her expertise and relationships. Rebecca's expression hardened. Then they'll need to adjust their expectations, won't they? I felt something shift inside me, grief giving way to a cold, clarifying anger. This isn't what Dad wanted. You know it, and I know it. What Dad wanted was proper documentation, apparently, Rebecca replied with exaggerated patience. If he had intended anything else, he would have updated his will accordingly. My mind raced through recent conversations with my father. Just 3 months ago, we had discussed the 5-year succession plan over dinner at his favorite steakhouse. You've earned this, Charlie, he'd said, using his lifelong nickname for me. The board respects you. The team follows you. I couldn't be prouder of what you've built. Had it all been empty words? It seemed impossible that the methodical, forward-thinking businessman I knew would leave such a critical transition to chance. Richard Montgomery had contingency plans for his contingency plans. Mr. Harrington, I said, turning to the attorney, when was this will drafted? The lawyer referred to the document. This version was executed 14 years ago, shortly after your graduation from MIT. 14 years ago, before I had joined the company, before we had developed our patented energy storage system, before I had helped transform MST from a regional consulting firm to an internationally recognized innovation leader. That can't be his final will, I insisted. Dad and I met with estate planners last year. He was reorganizing everything after his heart scare. Mr. Harrington's expression remained neutral, though something flickered behind his eyes. This is the most recent will filed with our firm. Rebecca stood, smoothing her immaculate charcoal suit. As difficult as this may be to accept, Charlotte, it seems our father didn't share your assumption about your role in the company's future. Perhaps he had concerns about your leadership capabilities that he spared you from hearing directly. The casual cruelty of her statement momentarily took my breath away. Daniel tensed beside me, but I squeezed his hand, silently asking him to let me handle this. Rebecca, I said calmly, you haven't spoken to Dad more than twice a year for the past decade. You declined his invitation to join the board 5 separate times. You've referred to his life's work as boring at every family gathering. Why would you even want MST? For just a moment, her composed facade cracked, revealing something raw underneath. Not grief for our father, but something harder. Resentment, perhaps. Want is irrelevant. It's about what's rightfully mine, she said coldly. The Montgomery legacy belongs to me as the eldest. That's how it works. The Montgomery legacy isn't about money or titles, I countered. It's about innovation, sustainability, creating technology that makes a difference. Dad built MST to have impact, not to be a trophy. Rebecca's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. How adorably idealistic. Business is business, Charlotte. Assets are assets. And as of today, those assets are mine to do with as I please. She turned to the attorney. I'll have my lawyers contact you about transferring the relevant accounts and properties. I assume there won't be any unnecessary delays? Mr. Harrington carefully returned the will to its folder. There are still certain protocols to follow, Ms. Montgomery. Estate settlements don't happen instantaneously, even in straightforward cases. Ensure that they happen expeditiously, then, Rebecca replied. I have plans for those resources. That won't wait indefinitely. The implications of her statement hit me like a physical blow. She wasn't planning to run the company. She was planning to liquidate it. The research, the patents, the team we'd built, all of it reduced to numbers on a balance sheet. You would dismantle everything he built? I asked, unable to keep the horror from my voice. Rebecca gathered her things, avoiding eye contact with everyone in the room. I would maximize the value of my inheritance. The market for green technology companies is quite favorable right now. As she moved toward the door, I found myself standing, though I had no memory of rising from my chair. Dad trusted me with his company, with his legacy. Every day for 10 years, I worked alongside him building something meaningful. You can't just walk in and destroy that because of an outdated document. Rebecca paused at the threshold, her expression almost pitying. That's exactly how inheritance works, Charlotte. Father made his choice by not updating his will. I suggest you start packing up your office. With that parting shot, she strode out, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. I sank back into my chair, my mind racing. This couldn't be happening. It made no sense that my methodical father would leave such a critical matter unaddressed. He had been meticulous about everything, especially after his heart attack 18 months ago had served as a mortality wake-up call. There has to be something else, I said, looking to Mr. Harrington. Another document, an addendum, something. The attorney's expression remained carefully neutral. I can only work with the documentation that has been properly filed and executed, Ms. Montgomery. But you know this isn't what he wanted, I pressed. You've been his attorney for decades. You've witnessed everything I've contributed to MST. Mr. Harrington closed his portfolio with deliberate care. The law must follow documented intentions, not assumed ones. I suggest you take some time to process today's information before making any decisions. As the meeting broke up, I remained seated, staring at the polished conference table where my future had just been derailed. Daniel stayed beside me, his usual problem-solving engineer's mind clearly searching for solutions. We'll figure this out, he promised, though the uncertainty in his voice betrayed his concern. Your father was too smart to leave things this way. I desperately wanted to believe him, but the evidence suggested otherwise. As everyone filed out, I was left wondering if I had fundamentally misunderstood my relationship with my father. If all those late nights, strategic planning sessions, and proud smiles had meant something entirely different to him than they had to me. Martha, our household manager, was the last to leave. She paused at the door, her kind face lined with concern. Your father adored you, Charlotte. Don't let today make you question that. As the door closed behind her, I was left alone with the devastating possibility that perhaps I had been building my life on an illusion, that the partnership I thought I'd formed with my father had been nothing more than a convenient arrangement for him, easily discarded when it came to his final wishes. What I didn't know then was that the real story of my father's intentions had only begun to unfold. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The drive back to my father's estate, our family home since I was 8 years old, passed in a blur. Rain pattered against the windshield, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. Daniel offered to come inside, but I needed solitude to process everything. I'll call you later, I promised, kissing his cheek before stepping out into the drizzle. The sprawling Georgian colonial sat on 3 acres in Wellesley, its brick facade and white columns a fixture of my childhood. As I approached the front door, I noticed Rebecca's rental car already in the circular driveway. My stomach tightened at the thought of another confrontation. Martha met me in the foyer, her expression conveying everything words couldn't. She's in your father's study, she said quietly, taking inventory. The words hit like a physical blow. Dad had been gone less than a week, and Rebecca was already cataloging his possessions like items at an estate sale. How long has she been here? I asked, hanging my rain-spattered coat on the antique hall tree. Arrived right after the reading. Went straight upstairs. Martha hesitated. Charlotte, there's something you should know. She's brought an appraiser. They're scheduled to arrive tomorrow morning to value the art collection and antiques. I closed my eyes briefly, steadying myself against a fresh wave of anger. The art collection had been my mother's passion, each piece carefully selected during her short but vibrant life. After her death when I was 6, Dad had maintained the collection exactly as she'd arranged it, a living museum to her memory. Thank you for telling me, I said, squeezing Martha's hand. I'll handle it. I found Rebecca in our father's study, a leather-bound notebook open before her as she methodically opened desk drawers, examining their contents. Making yourself at home already? I asked from the doorway. She didn't even look up. Just getting a head start on the inevitable. There's quite a lot to sort through. I stepped into the room, taking in the familiar space. The floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined with engineering, texts and first-edition novels, the scale model of our first microgrid project, the wall of photographs documenting family milestones and company achievements. The appraiser can wait, I said firmly. We buried Dad 3 days ago, Rebecca. Have some respect. Respect doesn't pay estate taxes, Charlotte. She closed a drawer and made a notation in her book. The IRS won't delay their deadlines because we're grieving. I moved to the desk, placing my hand on its polished surface. This desk had been the command center of our father's life, where he'd sketched his first designs, where he'd taught me calculus, where he'd signed the contracts that transformed our company from regional player to industry innovator. You can't possibly want to sit behind this desk, I said, studying her. You've spent your entire adult life avoiding anything to do with Dad's work. Rebecca finally looked up, her expression unnervingly calm. What I want is irrelevant. What matters is what's legally mine. Why? I demanded. You have your art gallery in New York, your consulting business. You've made it abundantly clear how little you care about sustainable energy. Why take the company away from someone who's dedicated their life to it? A flicker of something, resentment, pain, crossed her face before her neutral mask returned. Perhaps I've reconsidered the value of our father's legacy. You mean the monetary value, I corrected. Martha told me about the appraiser. Of course she did. Rebecca closed her notebook. The loyal family retainer, always taking your side. She's not taking sides. She's concerned about preserving Dad's memory. As am I. Memory doesn't require keeping this mausoleum intact, Charlotte. It's just stuff. It's not just stuff to me, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to remain calm. This house, the company, they're not just assets to be liquidated. They're everything Dad built, everything we built together. Rebecca stood, smoothing her skirt in a gesture so reminiscent of our mother that it momentarily caught me off guard. That's your fundamental misunderstanding. There is no we in this scenario. There's what Father legally designated as mine, and there's your sentimentality about a company that was never actually yours. The casual cruelty of her assessment left me speechless. In the silence that followed, my gaze drifted to the photographs on the wall. Dad and me at my MIT graduation, cutting the ribbon at our new research facility, accepting the Innovation and Sustainability Award last year. A decade of partnership captured in images. Look at these pictures, I said finally. You're barely in any of them. Not because Dad didn't want you there, but because you chose not to be. You rejected every invitation to be part of his life, part of the business. And yet here we are, she replied coolly. Perhaps Father finally recognized that business succession requires objectivity, not emotional attachment. The company needs strong leadership going forward. The kind of leadership that plans to break it apart and sell it to the highest bidder? Rebecca's expression hardened. the kind that maximizes value rather than clinging to outdated sentimentality. I took a steadying breath, trying a different approach. The company employs over 200 people, Rebecca. Our microgrid technology is being implemented in developing regions to provide sustainable power. We have contracts with 3 different humanitarian organizations. This isn't just about money. It's always about money in the end, she replied. Philanthropy is a luxury afforded by proper financial management. I studied my sister, trying to reconcile the cold woman before me with the girl who had once taught me to ride a bike, who had smuggled ice cream to my room after our mother's funeral when I couldn't stop crying. When had she become this person who could speak so callously about dismantling our father's life's work? What happened to you? I asked quietly. The question seemed to catch her off guard. For just a moment, her carefully constructed facade wavered. What happened is that I grew up and recognized how the world actually works. Father always made his priorities clear. I simply adapted accordingly. Before I could respond, Martha appeared in the doorway. Ms. Charlotte, there's someone here to see you. Mr. Lawrence from your father's office. He says it's urgent. Rebecca frowned. Edward Lawrence? The VP of Operations? What could possibly be urgent enough to interrupt a family discussion? I was already moving toward the door, relieved for any interruption to this painful conversation. I'll speak with him in the library. This concerns company matters, Rebecca interjected. As the new owner, I should be present. The entitled presumption in her tone ignited a fresh spark of anger. The transition isn't complete yet. Until it is, I'm still COO of Montgomery. Sustainable Technologies? I found Edward pacing before the library fireplace, still in his work suit despite the late hour. A trusted colleague for 8 years and my father's right-hand man before me, Edward's normally composed demeanor had been replaced by visible agitation. Charlotte, he said, relief washing over his features. Thank God. I've been trying to reach you. Sorry, I turned my phone off after the will reading. What's happening? It's Trans-Pacific Energy. He named our largest competitor, a conventional energy conglomerate that had been trying to acquire our patented storage technology for years. Their CEO called an emergency board meeting this afternoon. They're preparing to announce a hostile takeover bid for MST. The news hit like a bucket of ice water. That's impossible. They'd need majority shareholder approval, and my father owned controlling interest, which now apparently belongs to your sister, Edward said grimly. Their CFO reached out to me unofficially. Rebecca contacted them 3 days ago, the day after your father's funeral, to discuss acquisition terms. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated that for a moment I couldn't process it. She approached them before she even knew she was inheriting? Apparently she was quite confident about the outcome. Edward ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair. Charlotte, if Trans-Pacific acquires us, they'll strip the company for patents and shut down all our humanitarian projects. Everything we've built will be dismantled. The full implications clarified with terrible precision. Trans-Pacific had opposed our renewable energy initiatives at every turn. Their business model depended on maintaining dependence on conventional energy sources. They didn't want our innovations to succeed. They wanted to bury them. She can't do this, I said, mind racing. The board would never approve it. With controlling interest, she wouldn't need full board approval. And Trans-Pacific is offering a significant premium over market value, enough to tempt even the most loyal directors. I sank into a leather armchair trying to process this new development. How much time do we have? Their announcement is scheduled for Monday morning. Once it goes public, our stock will be in play. Edward checked his watch. Less than 60 hours. Have you spoken with the other board members? Tried to reach all 7. 3 are firmly opposed to any Trans-Pacific deal. 2 are on the fence. Jenkins and Michaels haven't returned my calls. And legally? Is there anything we can do to Block this? Edward's expression was grim. Not if your sister holds controlling interest? The bylaws are clear. What bylaws? I interrupted. The company bylaws or the shareholder agreement? Both. Your father established them during the last restructuring to ensure— He stopped suddenly, eyes widening. The restructuring. After his heart attack. 18 months ago? I confirmed, a glimmer of hope sparking. Dad completely reorganized the company's structure and governance. I remember signing dozens of documents. Documents that would have been filed with corporate counsel, Edward said, already pulling out his phone. Not with his personal attorney. For the first time since the devastating will reading, I felt a flutter of possibility. Mr. Harrington said he could only work with properly filed and executed documentation. He never specified what documentation he was referring to. I'll call Sullivan immediately, Edward said, referring to our corporate counsel. If your father filed updated governance documents or a shareholder agreement, they would have the records. As Edward stepped away to make the call, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Rebecca appeared in the doorway, her expression icy. Having a little emergency meeting without me? She asked. How inappropriate, considering the circumstances. I stood, facing her directly. Is it true you contacted Trans-Pacific about selling the company? Before Dad was even in the ground? If she was surprised by my knowledge, she didn't show it. I explored potential options. Any responsible business owner would do the same. You're not a business owner yet, I reminded her. And Trans-Pacific has fought against everything our company stands for. They would dismantle our research division and terminate our humanitarian projects. Rebecca shrugged, the gesture so casual it made my blood boil. Business is business. Sentiment has no place in asset management. Behind her, Edward ended his call, giving me a subtle nod that sent hope coursing through me. We'll see about that, I said, gathering my things. I need to go to the office. At this hour? Whatever for. I paused at the doorway. To protect our father's legacy, the real one, not the distorted version you've created in your mind. As I walked away, Rebecca called after me. Don't waste your time fighting this, Charlotte. You'll only make the transition more painful for yourself. I turned back to her, suddenly calm in the face of her calculated cruelty. You know what Dad always said about assumptions in engineering? They're the leading cause of structural failure. Your entire plan is built on assumptions, Rebecca. I wouldn't be so confident if I were you. Her composed expression flickered with the first hint of uncertainty as Edward and I headed for the door. The storm had passed, leaving behind a clear, night sky dotted with stars, a good omen, I decided, for the battle ahead. The Montgomery Sustainable Technologies headquarters stood as a testament to my father's vision. A renovated 19th-century textile mill transformed into a state-of-the-art facility with solar panels lining the roof, a living wall in the atrium, and geothermal heating throughout. Even at midnight, the building hummed with activity as the research division worked around the clock on our latest energy storage prototype. Security waved us through, accustomed to my late-night visits. The elevator carried us to the executive floor, where Edward used his keycard to access my father's private office, a space I hadn't been able to bring myself to enter since his passing. I spoke with Sullivan, Edward explained as he switched on the lights. He's meeting us here with whatever documentation he has regarding the restructuring. If your father created any additional provisions or amendments, they would be in the corporate records, not his personal estate files. The office stood frozen in time, exactly as my father had left it the Friday before his unexpected heart attack. Engineering journals stacked neatly on the side table, the whiteboard still covered with his distinctive handwriting, outlining the quarterly goals. His reading glasses perched atop a pile of technical specifications. I moved to his desk, running my fingers along the smooth wood. This doesn't make sense, Edward. Dad was methodical about everything. especially succession planning. After his first heart attack, he became obsessed with ensuring a smooth transition. Why would he leave the company vulnerable? He wouldn't, Edward said firmly. Richard Montgomery prepared for every contingency. If there's a plan in place, we'll find it. The office door opened, and James Sullivan entered, our silver-haired corporate counsel carrying a leather document case. His expression was grave but determined as he set the case on the conference table. Charlotte, Edward, he greeted us. I've brought everything related to the restructuring 18 months ago. There's quite a bit to go through. For the next 2 hours, we combed through corporate bylaws, shareholder agreements, board resolutions, and governance documents. The restructuring had been comprehensive, designed to protect the company's mission of advancing sustainable energy solutions regardless of leadership changes. Here, Sullivan said, pointing to a clause in the shareholder agreement. This is unusual. Your father created a special class of voting shares with specific transfer restrictions. I leaned closer, scanning the legal language. What does this mean in practical terms? It means that while ownership of the company can transfer through inheritance, voting control of certain decisions, including any sale of the company or major shifts in business direction, requires additional approval mechanisms. Sullivan flipped to another section. Specifically, any sale of the company or its key intellectual property requires a supermajority vote of the Guardian Committee. Guardian Committee? Edward and I exchanged confused glances. What's that? Sullivan turned to another document. It's a special oversight group your father established during the restructuring. 5 members with specific expertise in the company's core technologies and mission. He scanned the page. The committee includes the Chief Technology Officer, the VP of Humanitarian Initiatives, a representative from MIT's Energy Initiative where you partner on research, a sustainable energy advocate appointed by the board, and… He looked up, meeting my eyes. The most senior Montgomery family member actively working in the business for at least 5 years. Realization dawned on me. That would be me. Edward's face broke into the first smile I'd seen since the will reading. Richard, built in a failsafe. Even if Rebecca inherited his shares, she couldn't dismantle the company without committee approval. And considering the committee's composition, Sullivan added, approval for a sale to Trans-Pacific seems highly unlikely. Hope surged through me, followed immediately by confusion. But why wouldn't Mr. Harrington have mentioned this at the will reading? Surely he knew about these provisions. Sullivan frowned, closing the document. Harrington and Associates handles your family's personal legal matters, not corporate governance. These documents wouldn't have been in his files. So Rebecca inherits the company on paper, I said slowly, but cannot actually sell it without approval from a committee that would almost certainly vote against any deal with Trans-Pacific. Precisely, Sullivan confirmed. Your father created a sophisticated structure that separates ownership from control over the company's core mission. He hesitated. However, there's something else you should know. These protective provisions expire in certain circumstances. My stomach tightened. What circumstances? If no qualified Montgomery family member is actively working in a leadership capacity at the company for more than 6 months, control reverts fully to the majority shareholder. Sullivan met my eyes. If you were to leave the company, voluntarily, or otherwise, Rebecca would gain complete control after 6 months. The implication was clear. Rebecca might not be able to sell immediately, but she could force me out and simply wait for the protections to expire. She doesn't know about any of this yet, Edward pointed out. The Trans-Pacific deal assumes she has full control now. Which gives us a temporary advantage, I said, mind racing. We need to… A noise at the door interrupted us. Martha stood in the doorway, still in her work clothes despite the late hour, looking anxious but determined. I'm sorry to intrude, she said. But there's something you need to see, Charlotte. Something your father entrusted to me. Without waiting for a response, she entered the office and carefully placed a sealed envelope on the table. My name was written across it in my father's distinctive handwriting. He gave this to me 3 weeks ago, Martha explained. Said I should give it to you if anything happened to him, but only after the official will reading. My hands trembled slightly as I picked up the envelope. You knew about the will? About Rebecca inheriting everything? Martha nodded solemnly. Your father told me what was coming. He said, Martha, Charlotte will think I've betrayed her, but I need you to make sure she gets this letter at the right time. Everything depends on proper timing. I broke the seal and removed several pages covered in my father's handwriting. The letter began simply, My dearest Charlie, if you're reading this, 2 things have happened. I am gone, and Rebecca has laid claim to everything through my outdated will. I can only imagine your hurt and confusion. For that, I am deeply sorry. What must seem like betrayal is actually the opposite. It is my final effort to protect everything we've built together. Rebecca has been planning to challenge my estate plan for years. Her lawyers have been building a case that I was mentally unfit after my heart attack and that any changes to my will during that period were made under undue influence, specifically your influence. They've collected testimony from her friends, manipulated medical records, and prepared a legal strategy that would have tied up the company in court for years, damaging both its value and its mission. By leaving my outdated will in place, the one that predates both your involvement with the company and my health issues, I've removed the foundation of her legal strategy. She believes she has won, which was exactly my intention. But you and I know that ownership is not the same as control. During the restructuring, I created a governance system that protects the company's mission regardless of who holds the shares. Sullivan has all the documentation, which creates a separation between ownership and decision-making authority for any fundamental changes to the company's direction. There is, however, one final piece to this puzzle, one that neither Rebecca nor her lawyers could possibly know about. In the bottom right drawer of my desk, you'll find a false panel. Behind it is a safe with a combination you know well. Inside is a document that represents my true wishes for the company's future. Trust yourself, Charlie. You've earned the right to lead not because you're my daughter, but because you've demonstrated the vision, integrity, and determination that MST needs. I am so very proud of you. All my love, Dad. My vision blurred with tears as I finished reading. Martha squeezed my shoulder gently while Edward and Sullivan waited in respectful silence. I moved to my father's desk and knelt beside the bottom right drawer, pulling it open and feeling along the edges until I found a small indentation. Pressing it revealed a panel that slid away, exposing a compact wall safe. The combination I should know well, I murmured, thinking. Martha smiled. What date did you and your father celebrate every year? Just the 2 of you? Understanding dawned immediately. April 16th, the day I had come home from school, bursting with excitement about my science project on wind energy, and Dad had taken me to his workshop to build a working model. It was the day I had first shown interest in his work, the beginning of our shared passion. I entered Oro 416, but the safe remained locked. Frowning, I tried again with the full year, 04/16/2003. The lock clicked open. Inside was a single document in a sealed envelope marked Succession Plan, Final Version, with copies for corporate counsel, the board of directors, and me. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal and unfolded the papers. The document was dated just 3 weeks before my father's death. A comprehensive succession plan naming me as his chosen successor as CEO of Montgomery Sustainable Technologies, with a detailed transition timeline, strategic objectives, and governance structure. Most importantly, it included a legally executed transfer of his voting shares to me, separate from the inheritance of financial assets. This is a valid share transfer agreement, Sullivan said, reviewing the document. properly executed and notarized. It transfers voting control of your father's shares to you, effective upon his death, regardless of who inherits the underlying financial interest. So Rebecca would still technically own the shares, I clarified, but I would control how they're voted on company matters. Exactly, Sullivan confirmed. She would receive any dividends or financial benefits, but couldn't force a sale or change the company's direction without your approval. It's an elegant solution that gives her the financial assets while preserving your operational control. Why the elaborate scheme? Edward asked. Why not just update his will? Because of her legal challenge strategy, I said, understanding filling me. Dad knew she would tie up an updated will in court, claiming he was mentally incompetent. After his heart attack. This way, the will itself doesn't matter. The share transfer is a separate corporate document that would be much harder to challenge. Martha nodded. Your father was playing chess while Rebecca was playing checkers. He knew exactly what she would do and planned accordingly. For the first time since the will reading, I felt something beyond grief and betrayal. A sense of my father's continuing presence, his strategic mind still working to protect everything we had built together. Does this mean Charlotte is now in control of the company? Edward asked. Sullivan nodded, a smile breaking across his face. It does. Effective immediately. The weight that had been crushing me since the will reading began to lift. I wasn't powerless. I hadn't been abandoned or betrayed. My father had trusted me with his greatest creation. He had simply needed to be strategic about how he transferred that trust. Trans-Pacific won't be happy, Edward warned. They've likely spent considerable resources preparing for this acquisition. Neither will Rebecca, I added, the momentary elation giving way to pragmatic concerns. She'll challenge this arrangement. She can try, Sullivan said confidently. But your father created a nearly bulletproof structure. The share transfer agreement is separate from his estate, properly executed when he was demonstrably of sound mind, and consistent with his documented succession planning going back years. It would be extraordinarily difficult to invalidate. I gathered the documents, my mind already shifting from defense to offense. We need to inform the board immediately and prepare a statement rejecting any potential offer from Trans-Pacific. And Rebecca? Martha asked quietly. I paused, considering. My sister had effectively declared war, approaching Trans-Pacific, before our father was even buried, planning to dismantle everything he had built. The hurt and anger were still raw, but underneath them, a deeper understanding was emerging. She deserves to hear this from me directly, I decided. Before the board, before any public statements. Whatever has happened between us, we're still family. As we prepared to leave, I took one last look around my father's office, the space where he had taught me not just about engineering and business, but about integrity, perseverance, and strategic thinking. He hadn't abandoned me. He had entrusted me with protecting his legacy through the most challenging test it had ever faced. Thank you, Dad, I whispered, before turning off the lights and stepping into the corridor where the others waited, ready to implement the plan my father had, so carefully designed, not just for the company's future, but for mine. Dawn broke over Boston as I drove back to the Montgomery estate, the document case secure on the passenger seat beside me. The morning light cast long shadows across the manicured grounds, the dew-covered lawn glistening like scattered diamonds. This property had been in our family for 3 generations, a legacy of perseverance rather than privilege. My grandfather had purchased the land when it was nothing but overgrown fields, building the house room by room while establishing the engineering consultancy that would eventually evolve into Montgomery Sustainable Technologies. My father had expanded both, renovating the colonial structure while transforming the company from a traditional engineering firm into a pioneer in renewable energy solutions. Now it fell to me to protect and advance what they had built. The weight of that responsibility settled on my shoulders, not as a burden, but as a mantle I had been preparing to wear my entire professional life. I found Rebecca in the sunroom, already dressed in a tailored navy suit despite the early hour, typing rapidly on her laptop with a coffee cup at her elbow. Her overnight bag stood packed by the door. "Leaving so soon?" I asked, setting my father's document case on the glass table between us. She glanced up, her expression cool. "I have meetings in New York this afternoon. The art world doesn't pause for family drama." "Neither does corporate governance," I replied, taking the seat across from her. "We need to talk about Trans-Pacific energy." Her fingers stilled on the keyboard, the only indication that my words had impacted her carefully. Maintained composure. "I'm not sure what Edward Lawrence has been telling you, but preliminary discussions with potential buyers are perfectly standard when assessing asset value." Preliminary discussions that began before Dad was even buried? With a company that has actively lobbied against renewable energy initiatives for the past decade? I kept my voice level, watching her reactions. "That's not standard practice, Rebecca. That's betrayal." She closed her laptop with deliberate care. "Dramatic language doesn't change financial reality. Trans-Pacific is offering a substantial premium, 30% above current market valuation. The board would be negligent to dismiss such an offer without consideration." "The board won't be considering the offer at all," I said, opening the document case and removing the share transfer agreement. "Because I'm officially rejecting it on behalf of Montgomery Sustainable Technologies." Rebecca's perfectly sculpted eyebrows lifted slightly. "You don't have the authority to make that decision. The will was quite clear." "The will addressed Dad's personal assets," I acknowledged, sliding the agreement across the table. "This addresses corporate governance. It's a separate matter entirely." She picked up the document, scanning it with increasing disbelief. The color drained from her face as she reached the signature page with its official notarization. "This can't be legal," she finally said, her voice tight. "It contradicts the will." "Not at all. You still inherit the financial interest in Dad's shares. Any dividends, any appreciation in value. What this document does is separate that financial interest from voting control." I leaned forward. "Dad transferred voting rights to me 3 weeks before his death, as part of a comprehensive succession plan that he had been developing since his first heart attack." Rebecca's perfectly manicured nails dug into the document. "I'll challenge this. My attorneys will have it invalidated within a week." "You're welcome to try," I said calmly. But Dad anticipated that move, too. He left the outdated will in place precisely because he knew you were building a case to challenge any recent changes as the product of diminished capacity or undue influence. For the first time since our confrontation began, genuine shock registered on Rebecca's face. "How could you possibly know that?" In answer, I placed our father's letter on the table. "He knew what you were planning, Rebecca. The outdated will was bait. He let you think you had won so you would reveal your true intentions for the company." She didn't touch the letter, but her eyes darted across the visible portions of my father's handwriting. "This is absurd. You've clearly fabricated these documents in desperation." "The share transfer agreement has been filed with corporate counsel, the board of directors, and the SEC, I replied. "Its authenticity is beyond question. You're welcome to verify with any of them." Rebecca stood abruptly, pacing toward the windows that overlooked the garden our mother had designed decades ago. For several minutes she was silent, her back to me, shoulders rigid with tension. "Why?" she finally asked, her voice unusually quiet. "Why would he do this? Create this elaborate scheme rather than simply telling me his wishes?" The question contained a vulnerability I hadn't heard from my sister in years. I chose my words carefully. "Because he knew you wouldn't accept them," I said gently. "The last time you spoke about the company, really spoke about it, was during that terrible fight at Thanksgiving 5 years ago. You told him his life's work was a monument to technological obsession rather than meaningful contribution. Those words hurt him deeply. Rebecca turned, surprising me with the raw emotion in her expression. And yet now I discover he left me the financial interest, but not the control. What exactly was the point of that distinction if he thought so little of my business judgment? I hadn't expected this question, hadn't anticipated having to explain our father's reasoning to the sister who had seemed so coldly calculated in her actions. But her confusion appeared genuine. I think, I said slowly, he was trying to give us both what we truly valued. You've always been clear that you saw the company primarily as a financial asset. I've always seen it as a mission, a way to create meaningful change in the world. This arrangement honors both perspectives. Rebecca's laugh held no humor. How convenient that his solution gave you all the power. Not all the power, I corrected. You remain the majority shareholder. That comes with significant rights. You'll have board representation, financial transparency, and the ability to influence strategic direction through normal governance channels. What you won't have is unilateral authority to dismantle everything he built. She moved back to the table, scanning the documents again with a more analytical eye. And Trans-Pacific? Their offer will be declined, I said firmly. MST is not for sale, not to them, not to anyone. We have too much important work still to do. Rebecca studied me for a long moment. You really believe in all this, don't you? The renewable energy mission, the humanitarian projects, all of it. With every fiber of my being, I confirmed. And so did Dad. She sank back into her chair, something shifting in her expression. I never understood it, either of you. This devotion to technology and environmental idealism. It always seemed like you were both living in a fantasy world while I dealt with reality. The admission surprised me. For years, Rebecca had projected nothing but cool dismissal toward our enthusiasm for innovation. This glimpse of genuine confusion, perhaps even curiosity, was unexpected. Would you like to? I asked impulsively. Would I like to what? Understand it. What we've been building. Why it matters. I checked my watch. The research facility is 20 minutes from here. I could show you what we're working on. What you now partially own. No strings attached, just information. Suspicion flashed across her features. Why would you do that when I just tried to sell the company out from under you? It was a fair question. Why was I extending this olive branch to someone who had demonstrated such callous disregard for everything I valued? The answer came from a memory. Rebecca, at 16, helping me with my science fair project the week our mother died, staying up all night to finish the display when grief had overwhelmed me. Somewhere beneath the hardened exterior was the sister, who had once cared deeply about family. Because despite everything, you're still my sister, I said simply. And Dad believed you deserved to benefit from his life's work, even if he couldn't trust you with controlling it. I'm trying to understand and honor that distinction. Something complicated passed across Rebecca's face, skepticism giving way to reluctant curiosity. Fine, she said after a pause. Show me this miraculous technology that supposedly justifies preventing a highly profitable sale. We'll take my car, I offered, relieved that she had agreed. But first, I need to make a quick call. Stepping into the hallway, I called Edward to update him on the situation. Rebecca knows about the share transfer. We're heading to the research facility so I can show her what we've been developing. Are you sure that's wise? Edward asked, concern evident in his voice. She was ready to sell us out yesterday. She's still a major shareholder, I reminded him. Better she understands what she owns than remains completely alienated from it. Have Dr. Lin prepared to demonstrate the microgrids. Your father would be proud of your approach, Edward said after a pause. He always believed in building bridges rather than walls, even with difficult people. Especially with difficult people, I corrected with a small smile, remembering Dad's favorite saying. Anyone can collaborate with easy partners. The real test of leadership is finding common ground with challenging ones. Rebecca was waiting by the front door when I returned, her overnight bag replaced in the closet, a clear sign she had postponed her New York meetings. It was a small concession, but a meaningful one. The drive to the research facility passed. In charged silence, both of us processing the morning's revelations. As we approached the campus, a cluster of renovated industrial buildings surrounded by testing fields of solar arrays and wind turbines, I noticed Rebecca studying the landscape with more attention than she had ever shown toward the company's operations. This used to be a brownfield site, I explained as we passed through security. An abandoned chemical plant that had contaminated the surrounding soil. We remediated the entire area as part of the facility development. Expensive, Rebecca observed, the financier in her automatically calculating costs. And worth every penny, I countered. It demonstrated our commitment to environmental restoration while providing a perfect testing ground for our technologies. The contamination remediation process actually led to one of our most successful patents, a solar-powered soil treatment system now being used at industrial sites around the world. As we parked, Rebecca's attention was drawn to a group of students touring one of the testing fields. School field trip? Engineering fellows, I corrected. We partner with local universities to provide hands-on training for graduate students specializing in renewable energy. Many of our best innovations have come from these fellowship programs. Inside the main building, the industrial architecture had been preserved but modernized. Exposed brick walls and steel beams complemented by cutting-edge technology and open collaborative workspaces. Researchers and engineers moved purposefully through the facility, their energy palpable even at this early hour. Dr. Lin, our head of research and development, met us in the central atrium. A brilliant engineer with a perpetual smile and boundless enthusiasm. She had been one of my father's first hires when transitioning the company towards sustainable energy. Ms. Montgomery, she greeted me warmly before turning to my sister. And Ms. Montgomery as well. This is a pleasant surprise. We rarely see you at the facility. First time, actually, Rebecca admitted, taking in the bustling activity around. I say Charlotte thought I should see what I partially own. If Dr. Lin was surprised by this candid acknowledgement, she didn't show it. Perfect timing. We're conducting final testing on the third-generation microgrid today. Follow me. She led us through the facility to a cavernous testing lab where a compact arrangement of solar panels, battery components, and control systems was being monitored by a team of engineers. The setup was deceptively simple in appearance, about the size of 2 shipping containers combined. This doesn't look particularly revolutionary, Rebecca observed skeptically. Dr. Lin's smile widened. That's precisely the point. This system can provide reliable electricity for a community of 5,000 people using renewable sources, at a third of the cost of traditional infrastructure, with components that can fit in a standard shipping container for deployment anywhere in the world. She gestured toward a wall of monitors displaying data from field tests. We currently have prototype systems operating in rural communities across 3 continents, places that never had reliable electricity before. Children studying after dark for the first time. Medical clinics able to refrigerate vaccines. Small businesses operating equipment that was previously impossible. The pride in her voice was unmistakable, and I watched carefully as Rebecca absorbed the information, her expression thoughtful rather than dismissive. Trans-Pacific has been trying to acquire this technology for years, I explained quietly. Not to deploy it, but to shelve it. It threatens their entire business model of centralized energy production and distribution. Rebecca turned to me, her financial acumen connecting the dots. That's why they were willing to pay such a premium. This isn't just about acquiring a competitor, It's about preventing disruption to their core business. Exactly, I confirmed. If they controlled this technology, it would never reach the communities that need it most. For the first time since our confrontation began, I saw genuine understanding dawn in my sister's eyes, not just of the business implications, but of the human impact behind our work. It wasn't agreement, not yet, but it was a beginning. "Show me more," she said, surprising me with what sounded almost like genuine interest. "I want to understand exactly what I almost sold." For the next 3 hours, I guided Rebecca through every division of Montgomery Sustainable Technologies. The executive floor where strategic decisions were made. The engineering labs where innovations were tested and refined. The project management center where implementations around the world were monitored in real time. With each stop, I watched my sister's expression shift from skeptical to contemplative. In the Advanced Materials Laboratory, Dr. Patel demonstrated our newest solar panel coating, a nanomaterial that increased efficiency by 22% while reducing manufacturing costs. This makes solar economically viable even in regions with less consistent sunlight, he explained, displaying comparison data on nearby monitors. We're targeting a 30% price reduction within 18 months. Rebecca studied the financial projections with her analyst's eye. The market impact would be substantial. Every percentage point reduction in cost exponentially expands the potential customer base. Exactly, Dr. Patel beamed, pleased by her quick grasp of the implications. Sustainability only succeeds at scale, which requires economic viability, alongside environmental benefits. In the Humanitarian Projects Division, we reviewed a digital map displaying our implementation sites across developing regions. Green dots representing operational microgrids, yellow for those under construction, and red for communities on the waiting list. Each of these green dots represents approximately 5,000 people with reliable electricity, often for the first time, explained Samira Nair, our Director of Global Initiatives. Many of these communities previously relied on diesel generators, running a few hours daily, expensive, polluting, and unreliable. Rebecca moved closer to the display, studying the distribution pattern. There are hundreds of sites. 827 active installations, Samira confirmed, with another 300 scheduled for completion this year. The profit margins must be minimal, Rebecca observed, her financial instincts automatically calculating returns. On the humanitarian projects specifically, yes, I acknowledged. We operate those at just above cost. But the technological advancements and field testing from these implementations drive innovations that benefit our commercial applications, where margins are substantial. We ended the tour in the company museum, a room my father had insisted on creating to document both our successes and failures. Display cases showcased prototypes from various stages of development, while wall panels told the story of Montgomery Sustainable Technologies, from its origins as a traditional engineering firm to its current position as a renewable energy pioneer. Dad believed we should celebrate our failures alongside our achievements, I explained, gesturing toward a case containing several damaged components labeled Lessons in Material Limitations. Each of these represents a design approach that didn't work, and the knowledge gained from understanding why. Rebecca paused before a photograph of our father at 26, standing proudly before the company's original office, a converted gas station with a hand-painted sign. "I barely remember this place," she said softly. "I must have been 4 or 5 when he moved to the downtown office." "You used to draw pictures on his blueprints," I recalled, surprised by the sudden memory. "He kept one framed in his office for years. Your crayon doodles all over a structural analysis." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "He called it my first contribution to the company." The smile faded as quickly as it had appeared. That feels like several lifetimes ago. We arrived at the timeline wall displaying key milestones in the company's evolution. Near the center was a photograph that caught Rebecca's attention. our father cutting a ribbon at the opening of the research facility, with a teenage Rebecca grudgingly standing beside him while I bounced excitedly on his other side. "I remember. That day," she said, studying the image. "I was furious about having to cancel plans with friends to attend this corporate photo opportunity." "You made that abundantly clear," I recalled with a small laugh. "Dad bribed you with a new car to get you to smile for the cameras." "A BMW convertible?" Rebecca confirmed, surprising me with her own quiet laugh. "I was an expensive PR element." We fell silent, both contemplating the captured moment from years ago, a rare occasion when our entire family had been present. For a company milestone, however reluctantly on Rebecca's part. "Why did you stop coming?" I asked, the question emerging before I could consider its wisdom. "To company events, I mean. You were involved when we were younger, even if not enthusiastically. Then one day you just weren't anymore." Rebecca's expression closed slightly, her professional mask slipping back into place. For a moment, I thought she would deflect the question or respond with her usual dismissive coolness. Instead, she moved to a bench in the center of the room and sat, gathering her thoughts. "Do you remember Mom's gallery?" she asked unexpectedly. The question caught me off guard. Our mother had owned a small art gallery in the city's South End before her death, a space I had only vague memories of visiting as a young child. "Barely," I admitted. "I was only 6 when she died." "It was magical," Rebecca said, her voice softer than I'd heard in years. "Small, but perfectly curated. Artists would come from all over to show their work there, because Mom had an eye for emerging talent before anyone else recognized it." I sat beside her, sensing we were approaching something important. "I didn't realize you remembered it so clearly." "It was my favorite place in the world," she continued. "I spent every afternoon there after school, helping Mom arrange exhibitions, listening to her talk with artists about technique and inspiration. She was teaching me about art and curation, preparing me to perhaps take over someday." Understanding began to dawn. And then she was gone. Rebecca nodded, her perfectly composed facade showing rare cracks. "Dad sold the gallery within months. He said he couldn't bear to keep it without her, but he never asked how I felt about it. I was losing not just my mother, but the future I had imagined with her." "You were only 10, I said gently. "He was trying to protect you from painful reminders." "Perhaps," she acknowledged. "But after that, it was all about the engineering firm. Every conversation, every family dinner, every weekend activity somehow connected back to Montgomery engineering. My interests in art and culture were treated as nice hobbies, but never taken seriously. The message was clear. The company was the Montgomery legacy that mattered." I had never considered this perspective before. How differently we had experienced our childhood home dominated by our father's passion for his work. For me, it had been an invitation into an exciting world of innovation. For Rebecca, it had apparently felt like the erasure of her connection to our mother and her own distinct interests. "When I finally established my gallery in New York," she continued, "Dad's response was to send a congratulatory note and a check. Generous, but completely impersonal. No visit, no real interest in what I was building. Meanwhile, he was attending every science fair and engineering competition of yours, beaming with pride." The revelation shifted something fundamental in my understanding of my sister. Her coldness toward the company, her apparent disinterest in our father's work. These weren't simply personality traits, but responses to feeling sidelined. Her passion for art treated as secondary to the engineering legacy. "I had no idea you felt that way," I said honestly. "I always thought you just weren't interested in what we were doing." "I wasn't," she admitted. "But the reason wasn't simple disinterest. It was self-preservation. Why invest emotionally in a world where I was always going to be an afterthought?" She straightened, her momentary vulnerability receding. "That's ancient history now. We've all made our choices. including Dad's final choice to give you financial ownership while protecting operational control, I noted. Maybe he understood more than either of us realized. Rebecca considered this, studying a nearby display showcasing the company's financial growth over 3 decades. Perhaps, she conceded, though his methods leave something to be desired, in terms of transparency. That we can agree on, I said with a rueful smile. I wish he had trusted us enough to have an honest conversation about succession rather than these elaborate posthumous reveals. A notification chimed on my phone. A reminder of the emergency board meeting scheduled for noon to address the Trans-Pacific situation. Reality intruded on our moment of unexpected connection. I need to prepare for the board meeting, I explained, standing. They'll be expecting clarification about the leadership transition and a definitive response to Trans-Pacific's approach. Rebecca rose as well, smoothing her already immaculate suit. And what will that response be now that you're in control? A firm rejection of any acquisition offer, I said without hesitation, along with a request for the board's support of the succession plan Dad put in place. Which positions you as CEO? She observed, her tone neutral rather than accusatory. Yes, I confirmed, with a commitment to maintaining our strategic direction, focusing on both commercial success and humanitarian impact. Rebecca was quiet for a moment, her analytical mind clearly processing everything she had seen and learned throughout the morning. The humanitarian projects, she finally said, they're genuinely impressive. I didn't expect the scale or impact of what you've built. Coming from my pragmatic, profit-focused sister, this acknowledgement felt monumental. Thank you, I said simply. That means a lot. Don't misunderstand, she added quickly. I still believe there are more financially efficient approaches to running this company, but I can see why breaking it apart would destroy something meaningful. It wasn't a full endorsement of our mission, but it represented a significant shift from her previous position. The tour had accomplished what I had hoped, giving Rebecca a clearer understanding of what she had almost dismantled. What will you do now? I asked as we walked toward the exit. Challenge the share transfer? She considered the question carefully. I need to consult with my attorneys about the legal standing of these arrangements. Your explanation makes rational sense, but verification is only prudent. Of course, I agreed, respecting her need for due diligence. Sullivan can provide any documentation they require. As we reached my car, Rebecca paused, turning to face me directly. Regardless of the legal outcome, I want you to know that I'm withdrawing my agreement with Trans-Pacific. Whatever happens with control of the company, I won't be the one to sell it to them. The concession surprised me, a peace offering I hadn't expected after years of emotional distance and the recent conflict. Thank you, I said sincerely. That means more than you know. Don't mistake this for sentimentality, she cautioned, though without her usual sharpness. It's simply sound business judgment based on new information. The long-term value of MST's innovations clearly exceeds the short-term gain from Trans-Pacific's offer. I smiled, recognizing the olive branch disguised as rational analysis. My sister would never admit to being moved by the human impact of our work, but she had found a way to acknowledge its value within her own framework. Sound business judgment works for me, I assured her. As we drove back toward the estate in more comfortable silence than before, I realized that while the legal documents had secured the company's future, perhaps more important progress had been made in rebuilding a connection with my sister. The foundation was fragile, based more on mutual understanding than genuine reconciliation, but it was a beginning. The relationship, like so many aspects of my father's legacy, would require careful cultivation to flourish. But for the first time in years, I felt hopeful that both the company and the family might find a path forward together, each honoring their distinct parts of the Montgomery legacy. The Montgomery Sustainable Technologies boardroom fell silent as I finished presenting the succession documents. Around the polished teak table sat 9 individuals who collectively guided our company's strategic direction: 4 independent directors, 3 executive officers, my father's empty chair, and now me. The morning sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the scale models of our signature projects displayed along the perimeter walls. "These documents appear comprehensive," observed Eleanor Winters, our lead independent, director and former energy sector regulator. A formidable woman in her 60s with silver hair and penetrating gray eyes, she had been my father's most trusted advisor on the board. Richard clearly put considerable thought into this succession plan. "Indeed," agreed Sullivan, who had accompanied me to verify the documentation's authenticity. "Everything is properly executed, notarized, and filed with the appropriate authorities. The share transfer agreement is legally binding." Across the table, Michael Jenkins, our most recent board addition and the only director who had consistently advocated for more aggressive monetization of our technologies, leaned forward with a skeptical expression. "While the legal standing may be clear, I'm concerned about the unusual nature of this arrangement. Separating ownership from voting control creates potential governance complications." "Not unusual at all in family businesses," countered Dr. Rajiv Mehta, our chief medical officer and longtime board member. "Many successful enterprises maintain family control while distributing financial interest more broadly. The Ford Motor Company operated under similar principles for decades." Jenkins persisted. "The timing remains concerning. These documents emerged conveniently after Ms. Montgomery's sister had initiated discussions with Trans-Pacific Energy." I met his skepticism directly. "The timing was my father's explicit strategy, Mr. Jenkins. He anticipated a challenge to any updated will and created a separate mechanism for transferring operational control while ensuring Rebecca received the financial benefits of ownership. A solution that honors both daughters' relationships with the company," observed Eleanor thoughtfully. "Quite elegant, actually." Dr. Avery Chen, the MIT professor who represented our academic partnerships on the board, nodded in agreement. Richard always approached problems from multiple angles. This reflects his typical thoroughness. After further discussion, Eleanor called for a vote to formally acknowledge the succession plan and confirm my appointment as Chief Executive Officer. The result was decisive: 7 in favor, with Jenkins abstaining and my vote temporarily recused, while my status was determined. "Congratulations, Charlotte," Eleanor said, extending her hand. "The board officially recognizes you as CEO of Montgomery Sustainable Technologies, effective immediately." A wave of emotion washed over me. Relief mingled with profound responsibility. This was no longer about defending my position. It was about leading the company forward. "Thank you for your confidence," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I'm committed to honoring my father's vision while addressing the challenges ahead." The next agenda item addressed Trans-Pacific's anticipated hostile takeover attempt. I outlined the situation clearly, including Rebecca's withdrawal of her preliminary agreement. Despite my sister's changed position, Trans-Pacific may still proceed with their plans, I explained. Their interest in acquiring our technology remains strong, regardless of who controls the voting shares. Dr. Chen frowned. "Their acquisition strategy has always troubled me. Their public commitment to renewable energy contradicts their lobbying efforts against emission regulations." "Precisely," I agreed. "Our analysis suggests they intend to acquire our microgrid technology to control its deployment, potentially delaying widespread implementation that would threaten their conventional energy infrastructure investments." Edward Lawrence, attending as our Chief Operating Officer, presented our recommended response strategy. "We propose issuing a clear statement rejecting any acquisition interest, accompanied by an accelerated development timeline for our humanitarian projects. This would demonstrate our commitment to independent operation while emphasizing the mission-driven aspects of our business that would be compromised under Trans-Pacific ownership." The board unanimously approved this approach, with Jenkins finally joining the consensus after receiving additional financial projections showing the long-term value of independence versus immediate acquisition returns. As the meeting concluded, Sullivan pulled me aside. Rebecca's attorneys have requested copies of all succession documentation. She's conducting her due diligence, as expected. Provide everything they need, I instructed. Complete transparency is in everyone's best interest. Eleanor approached next, her expression warm but serious. Your father would be proud, Charlotte, but remember, this is just the beginning. The leadership transition will face scrutiny from all quarters: employees, investors, competitors. How you handle the coming weeks will set the tone for your entire tenure. I understand, I assured her. I'd like to schedule one-on-one meetings with each board member over the next few days to discuss priorities and concerns. She nodded approvingly. Excellent start. Now let's address the elephant in the room, your sister. How do you intend to manage that relationship going forward? As majority shareholder, she remains a significant factor in the company's governance ecosystem. It was the question I had been contemplating since our unexpected breakthrough at the research facility. I believe we've established a foundation for a more productive relationship. Rebecca has agreed to withdraw her support for the Trans-Pacific acquisition, which suggests she's open to understanding the company's value beyond immediate financial returns. A promising development, Eleanor agreed, but family dynamics and business governance rarely mix smoothly. Consider formalizing her role to provide appropriate channels for her input while maintaining clear operational boundaries. Her advice crystallized an idea that had been forming since morning. What about offering her a position on the board? Not as an executive director, but as a major shareholder representative. It would give her a voice in governance while acknowledging her financial stake. Eleanor considered this thoughtfully. Unconventional after such conflict, but potentially inspired. It would transform an adversarial relationship into a collaborative one, if she's receptive. I believe she might be, I said, thinking of Rebecca's surprising appreciation for our humanitarian projects. She's seen what we're building here. That understanding changes the equation. After the board dispersed, I remained in the conference room, absorbing the reality of my new position. The wall of past leaders featured photographs of my grandfather, my father, and now an empty frame waiting for my official portrait. 3 generations of Montgomery innovation, with me as the latest steward. A knock at the door interrupted my contemplation. Martha entered carrying a small wooden box I recognized immediately, my father's fountain pen case. Your father wanted you to have this when you took leadership, she explained, placing the box before me. He used these pens to sign every significant contract in the company's history. Inside were 3 vintage fountain pens, each representing a phase of Montgomery Sustainable Technologies evolution. The oldest, a restored Parker 51 from the 1940s, had belonged to my grandfather. The second, a classic Mont Blanc Meisterstück, had been my father's daily companion throughout his career. The third was unfamiliar, a contemporary Namiki with a custom-designed barrel featuring our company logo inlaid in mother-of-pearl. A small note in my father's handwriting accompanied this newest edition. For Charlotte, to write the next chapter. The thoughtfulness of this gift, prepared while he was still alive in anticipation of this moment, moved me deeply. It wasn't just a ceremonial heirloom but a tangible symbol of continuity and evolution, each generation building upon the foundation laid by those who came before while adding their unique contribution. My assistant appeared at the door. Your 11 o'clock is here. The executive team is assembled in the strategy room. Taking a deep breath, I selected the Namiki pen, sliding it into my jacket pocket. Thank you, I'll be right there. The executive team, 12 Division, leaders who managed MST's daily operations, waited anxiously, clearly briefed on the morning's developments, but uncertain about implications for their respective areas. These were the individuals who would translate vision into implementation, whose support would be essential for successful leadership transition. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," I began, taking my position at the head of the table. Not my father's usual seat, but the adjacent one. A subtle acknowledgement that I would lead differently while honoring his legacy. I outlined the succession plan, the board's confirmation of my appointment, and our unified response to Trans-Pacific's acquisition attempt. With each point, I observed their reactions carefully, noting which leaders appeared relieved, concerned, or calculating how these changes might affect their positions. "I know this transition comes with uncertainty," I acknowledged. "You've all worked closely with my father, some for decades. His leadership style was distinctive and effective. I won't attempt to replicate it exactly because that would be inauthentic and ultimately unsuccessful." The honesty appeared to resonate, tensions visibly easing around the table. "Instead," I continued, "I intend to build on his foundation while bringing my own perspective to our challenges. To that end, I'll be meeting individually with each of you over the next 2 weeks to discuss your priorities, concerns, and ideas." Dr. Lin, who had so enthusiastically guided Rebecca through our research facility that morning, raised her hand. "What about the third-generation microgrid deployment schedule? We're prepared to accelerate production if that remains a priority." "Not just a priority," I confirmed, "but our central focus for the coming quarter. The board has approved our recommendation to accelerate humanitarian deployments as a tangible demonstration of our continued independence and mission." This announcement generated visible enthusiasm among the team, particularly from those who had championed our humanitarian initiatives against occasional resistance from more commercially focused executives. As the meeting progressed to operational details, I found myself settling into the leadership role with increasing comfort. My decade of preparation, observing my father, gradually assuming greater responsibility, building relationships throughout the organization, provided a foundation that steadied me through this abrupt transition. By meeting's end, the initial anxiety had transformed into cautious optimism. Several executives lingered afterward to share specific project updates or offer congratulations. Their support wasn't universal. I noted a few whose loyalty would need to be earned rather than assumed, but the overall response suggested the transition could succeed. As the day continued, I addressed one constituency after another: our communications team to craft the public announcement, our investor relations director to prepare market updates, our legal department to finalize responses to Trans-Pacific's anticipated maneuvers. Each interaction built momentum for the transition while reinforcing the message of continuity amid necessary evolution. By late afternoon, I had reclaimed enough mental space to consider the most delicate relationship requiring attention, Rebecca. Despite our morning breakthrough, the legal and emotional complexities of our new arrangement demanded careful navigation. I found her in my father's study at the estate, reviewing financial documents with focused attention. Her laptop displayed spreadsheets analyzing MST's historical performance compared to industry benchmarks. "Doing your homework?" I asked, setting down a tray with 2 cups of tea, Earl Grey with lemon, which had been our mother's favorite. Rebecca looked up, her expression unreadable. "Due diligence. Your board presentation was impressive, according to my sources." "The directors recognized Dad's clear intentions," I acknowledged, taking the chair across from her. "They've formally appointed me as CEO, effective immediately." She nodded, neither surprised nor visibly upset by this confirmation. "Sullivan provided the documentation my attorneys requested. They're reviewing everything now." I pushed 1 teacup toward her. "And your preliminary assessment?" Rebecca accepted the cup, her gesture toward civility matching mine. "The share transfer agreement appears legally sound. Dad was methodical, as always." "And your position regarding Trans-Pacific?" "As I said this morning, I've withdrawn my preliminary agreement. I've instructed my attorney to inform them directly." She took a careful sip of tea. They were not pleased. I could imagine the reaction from the multinational energy conglomerate that had believed it was on the verge of acquiring our innovative technology, only to have the opportunity evaporate. They may still pursue a hostile approach. Unlikely to succeed given the governance structure Dad created, Rebecca observed with dispassionate analysis. The supermajority requirements for any acquisition approval make their path nearly impossible. Without your support. Her clinical assessment of the situation reinforced my impression from the morning. Rebecca might not share my emotional investment in the company's mission, but she possessed a razor-sharp understanding of business dynamics. This perspective, so different from my own, could be valuable if properly channeled. I've been considering your position going forward, I said, deciding to present the board idea directly. As majority shareholder, you have a legitimate interest in the company's governance, even with voting rights separated. Rebecca's eyebrow lifted slightly. I anticipated being relegated to a purely passive investor role. That would waste your expertise, I countered, and create unnecessary tension where we could instead build something productive. What exactly are you proposing? A board position, I said straightforwardly. As shareholder representative, it would give you visibility into strategic decisions and a voice in governance while respecting the operational boundaries Dad established. Surprise flickered across her features before her analytical expression returned. After I attempted to sell the company to Trans-Pacific, you're offering me a board seat? That's either extraordinarily generous or remarkably naive. Neither, I replied calmly. It's pragmatic. You're intelligent, financially astute, and now have a better understanding of what MST actually does. Your perspective would be valuable, particularly regarding financial optimization that doesn't compromise our core mission. Rebecca studied me with newfound curiosity. You're serious? Completely. The alternative is to maintain an adversarial relationship that benefits neither of us nor the company. She set down her teacup, considering the offer with the careful deliberation she applied to all business decisions. I would need certain assurances regarding information access and genuine consideration of my input. Reasonable expectations for any board member, I agreed. Sullivan can draft appropriate terms for mutual review. Rebecca nodded slowly. I'll consider it seriously. As I left her to her deliberations, I felt a sense of cautious optimism. The path forward remained challenging, rebuilding trust. With my sister would take time, just as fully assuming leadership of the company would require proving myself beyond my father's reputation. Yet for the first time since his death, I could envision how both relationships might evolve toward something meaningful, honoring the past while creating a future that neither my father nor I could have anticipated alone. His final gift hadn't just been the company leadership, but the opportunity to forge a new connection with my sister who had seemed permanently estranged. Later that evening, as I sorted through files in my newly occupied CEO office, I discovered a small envelope tucked into my father's succession plan, a final message I had overlooked in the earlier review. Charlie, it read in his distinctive handwriting. Leadership isn't about having all the answers, but about asking the right questions and listening carefully to the responses. Your greatest strength has always been seeing bridges where others see only chasms. Trust that ability, especially with Rebecca. You two are more alike than either of you realizes, stubborn, brilliant, and fiercely protective of what you value. Those shared qualities caused your divergence. They can also enable reconciliation if approached with wisdom rather than righteousness. I've left you both parts of my legacy in the hope that together you might build something greater than I could imagine alone. With love and confidence, Dad. I tucked the note carefully into my journal, recognizing it as both blessing and challenge. The coming days would test my leadership in ways I couldn't yet anticipate, but for now I had taken the first essential steps, securing the company's future and extending an olive branch that might, with care and patience, heal the family fractures. my father had tried to address in his characteristically indirect way. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, for the first time since my father's death, I felt truly ready to face them. The official announcement of my appointment as CEO generated exactly the media storm we had anticipated. By 9 the UIDAO, following morning, my inbox overflowed with interview requests. My phone buzzed constantly with congratulatory messages, and our corporate communications team had established a command center to manage the public narrative. The financial press is focused on the unusual share structure, explained Diane Matthews, our head of communications during our morning briefing. The Wall Street Journal is calling it Montgomery's innovative succession solution. Bloomberg has requested an exclusive on the governance arrangement. And the technology publications? I asked, scanning the media summary she had prepared. They're more interested in what this means for our development roadmap, Diane replied, particularly whether the leadership transition will accelerate or delay the next generation microgrid deployment. I considered our media strategy carefully. Schedule the Bloomberg interview for tomorrow. They'll give the governance structure fair treatment. For the technology outlets, let's arrange a joint interview with Dr. Lin to emphasize continuity in our research direction. As Diane made notes, Edward entered with an expression that immediately raised my concern. Trans-Pacific has made their move, he announced without preamble. Not a hostile takeover attempt as we expected, but something potentially more problematic. He handed me a press release scheduled for distribution within the hour. Trans-Pacific Energy was announcing a major new initiative, the Global Access Energy Program, with superficial similarities to our humanitarian projects, but backed by $5 billion in funding and partnerships with 3 international development organizations. They're positioning themselves as the humanitarian alternative, I realized, scanning the document. Promising conventional energy infrastructure to developing regions with financing terms that appeared generous on the surface. Edward nodded, grimly. It's designed to undercut our market position while claiming the moral high ground. Their CEO is giving a press conference at noon, framing this as practical solutions versus experimental technology. The strategy was clever. Rather than directly attacking our company, Trans-Pacific was establishing a competing narrative about the best path toward global energy access, conventional infrastructure versus our renewable microgrids. Their vastly greater resources could potentially overwhelm our carefully built implementation network. We need to respond strategically, not reactively, I decided after consideration. Schedule a meeting with our humanitarian partnerships team and Dr. Lin. We'll need comparative data on long-term costs, environmental impact, and community self-sufficiency between our approaches and conventional infrastructure. As Edward departed, to arrange the meeting, I received an unexpected text from Rebecca. Trans-Pacific's announcement is a direct response to losing the acquisition opportunity. They're attempting to undermine your market position through competitive philanthropy. Clever but transparent. Call me. I have thoughts on countering this. The message surprised me, both in its analytical insight and the offer of assistance. Perhaps the board position proposal had resonated more deeply than she had initially indicated. I immediately called her, curious about her perspective. Their strategy has 3 vulnerabilities, Rebecca stated without preliminary small talk when she answered. First, the financing terms contain deferred payment structures that essentially create energy debt traps for developing nations. Second, they've overpromised on implementation timeline. 5,000 communities within 2 years is logistically impossible given supply chain constraints. Third, they've partnered with organizations that have conflicting sustainability commitments. Her assessment was incisive and matched my own concerns about Trans-Pacific's announcement. What's your recommended response? Not a direct confrontation, she advised. Instead, accelerate and amplify your existing success stories. The communities, already transformed by your microgrids, become your most powerful advocates. Financial analysis demonstrating true long-term costs of their conventional approach versus your renewable solution will resonate with development organizations. We're gathering that comparative data now, I confirmed, but distribution remains challenging. Trans-Pacific has massive media reach through their advertising relationships. That's why you need unexpected messengers, Rebecca replied, her tone shifting from analytical to strategic. I have connections with 3 international development journalists who specialize in infrastructure projects. They've previously documented energy debt traps in developing regions. They would be interested in this story, especially with access to communities already using your microgrids. Her offer represented exactly the kind of value I had hoped she might bring when proposing the board position, a different network and perspective that complemented our existing capabilities. That would be tremendously helpful. Are you making this offer as a potential board member, or just as a concerned shareholder? A brief pause followed before Rebecca answered. Consider it a trial collaboration. I'm still evaluating the board position, but this situation affects our shared financial interests regardless of my decision. Fair enough, I agreed. Would you be willing to join the response strategy meeting this afternoon? Your financial analysis skills would be valuable in dissecting the true costs of their approach. Another brief hesitation. Send me the details. I'll attend remotely. The strategic response meeting convened in our largest conference room that afternoon, bringing together an eclectic team, our humanitarian projects leaders, financial analysts, communications specialists, and Dr. Lin representing the technical division. Rebecca joined via video conference, her New York penthouse visible in the background. Trans-Pacific's announcement presents both threat and opportunity. Began addressing the assembled team. They're attempting to position conventional energy infrastructure as the pragmatic humanitarian solution, while characterizing our renewable approach as experimental and impractical. The timing is clearly retaliatory, observed Samira from Humanitarian Projects. They've never shown interest in development work before losing the acquisition opportunity. Precisely, I agreed. But their announcement has drawn significant media attention to energy access challenges in developing regions, attention we can leverage to highlight the advantages of our approach. Dr. Lin presented technical comparisons between conventional infrastructure and our microgrid solutions, emphasizing self-sufficiency, maintenance requirements, and environmental impact. Samira followed with implementation case studies from communities already transformed by our technology. When Rebecca's turn came, she shared her screen to display a sophisticated financial analysis of Trans-Pacific's proposed program. Their financing structure essentially creates perpetual dependence, she explained, highlighting sections of their announcement documents. Communities must purchase fuel continuously at rates that escalate over time, while maintenance requirements ensure ongoing service contracts with Trans-Pacific subsidiaries. Her presentation impressed even the skeptics in the room who had questioned her involvement given recent events. Her analysis was thorough, precise, and damning, revealing the program as a thinly disguised market expansion strategy rather than genuine humanitarian initiative. The critical question, Rebecca concluded, is which story reaches key decision-makers in development organizations and government funding agencies. Trans-Pacific has advertising resources, but you have something more valuable, demonstrable: success and genuine independence from fossil fuel supply chains. The collaborative energy in the room shifted the dynamic from defensive reaction to strategic opportunity. By meeting's end, we had developed a comprehensive response plan, not attacking Trans-Pacific directly, but rather amplifying our existing successes through carefully selected channels while providing third-party analysis of the long-term implications of both approaches. As the team dispersed to implement various aspects of the plan, Rebecca remained on the video conference. That was surprisingly productive, she observed. Your team is competent. Coming from Rebecca, this constituted high praise. They're exceptional, I agreed. Each brings different expertise but shares commitment to the mission. Mission-driven organizations often sacrifice financial discipline for idealism, she noted. That doesn't appear to be the case here. Your operational metrics are impressive considering the challenging implementation environments. Her acknowledgement of our business fundamentals represented significant progress from her previous dismissal of our work as impractical idealism. We've worked hard to ensure sustainability in both environmental and financial terms. The mission fails if the business model doesn't support continued innovation. Rebecca's expression remained analytical, but had lost some of its characteristic skepticism. I've been reviewing the quarterly projections and 5-year strategic plan. Your growth trajectory is ambitious but supported by reasonable assumptions. Does that influence your thinking about the board position? I asked directly. It does, she admitted after a moment's consideration, as does the response to today's competitive challenge. Your team demonstrated adaptability I hadn't expected. Then you'll accept the position? Rebecca straightened in her chair, the business negotiator reasserting herself. I have conditions. First, I want full transparency on financial and strategic decisions, not just the sanitized versions presented at typical board meetings. Second, I expect my input on efficiency and monetization opportunities to receive serious consideration, even when it challenges conventional thinking. Third, I want a defined role in investor relations appropriate to my position as majority shareholder. The requests were substantial but reasonable, focusing on information access and meaningful participation rather than control. Those terms are acceptable, provided you acknowledge the operational boundaries established by the share transfer agreement and commit to supporting the company's core mission, even while advocating for financial optimization. Agreed, Rebecca Siu said without hesitation. I have no interest in micromanaging daily operations or undermining the company's fundamental purpose. My concern is ensuring maximum sustainable value creation within that framework. With that exchange, a new chapter in both our professional and personal relationship began. Not based on complete trust, which would require more time to rebuild, but on mutual respect for each other's distinct capabilities and acknowledgement of our shared interests in the company's success. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe. And turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.